If you ever hear someone knocking from inside a school locker, don't open it. I learned that the hard way. This happened to my friend Mia during her freshman year. Every evening, when she was one of the last ones to leave, she'd walk down the main hall. It was always quiet, almost eerily so, with the lights dimmed and the long shadows stretching down the corridor. And every single evening, as she passed locker 319, she would hear it. 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, from the inside. Locker 319 was old, dented, and covered in faded stickers from years ago. Nobody used it. It was one of those forgotten relics of the school, stuck between 2 perfectly functional lockers. The first few times Mia heard the knocking, she just brushed it off. It had to be a prank, right? Maybe some kids from the drama club were trying to spook people after hours. Or maybe it was just the old building settling, the pipes groaning. She tried to convince herself it was anything but what it sounded like. But the knocking was persistent. It happened every evening, always the same rhythm, always from the same locker. Her curiosity started to get the better of her. Who would be so dedicated to a prank? After about a week of this, she decided she'd had enough. One evening, as she walked past and heard the familiar tap, tap, she stopped. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she felt a strange sense of defiance. She leaned in close, took a deep breath, and knocked back on the cold metal door. 3 times. The response was immediate. 3 loud, frantic knocks answered her from inside, much more forceful than before. They sounded desperate. Mia jumped back, her blood turning to ice. This wasn't a prank. The sheer speed of the reply was too quick, too sharp. It felt real. She didn't wait for another sound. She grabbed her backpack and sprinted out of the school, not looking back once. The next morning, everything seemed normal. The sun was shining. Students were laughing and chatting in the hallways. Mia almost convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing, that her mind was playing tricks on her in the empty school. But then she saw the janitor, Mr. Henderson, standing by locker 319, shaking his head. He was muttering to himself, looking disturbed. Mia cautiously approached him and asked if everything was all right. He pointed a shaky finger at the locker door. "Some kid must be pulling a really sick joke," he said, his voice low. "Look at this." Mia leaned in closer and felt a chill crawl up her spine. All around the edges of the locker door, where the metal met the frame, were fresh scratches. They looked like they were made by fingernails, dug deep into the paint, leaving behind a rusty reddish-brown residue. They definitely weren't there yesterday. Mr. Henderson sighed. "Looks like I'll have to try and buff this out." Mia's mind was racing. The knocks, the frantic response, and now these scratches. This was too much. She knew she had to tell someone. She went straight to the principal's office and reported everything she had seen and heard. The secretary listened patiently, but with a skeptical look on her face. She typed something into her computer, her expression slowly shifting from disbelief to concern. "Locker 319, you said?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mia nodded. The secretary looked up, her face pale. "That's not possible," she said. "According to our records, that locker hasn't been assigned or opened in 12 years. She explained that 12 years ago, a student named Alex had vanished without a trace. He was last seen on campus near that very section of lockers. The police investigated for months, but they never found him. As a sort of unofficial memorial, the school had sealed his locker, number 319, and never issued it to anyone again." A wave of dread washed over Mia. The school decided they had to investigate. They called in maintenance to force the locker open. A small crowd gathered Mia, the principal, Mr. Henderson, and a couple of teachers. There was a tense silence as the maintenance worker used a crowbar to pry the rusted door open. It screeched in protest, a horrible grating sound that echoed down the empty hall. Finally, the door swung open. Everyone leaned in, holding their breath, expecting something. But the locker was empty, completely bare. No books, no old clothes, nothing. Just a dusty, dark space. A collective sigh of relief went through the small crowd. It was all just a weird coincidence, a spooky school legend. But then Mr. Henderson, who had a flashlight, pointed it towards the back of the locker. Lying on the bottom shelf was a single folded piece of paper. It looked old and yellowed. The principal carefully reached in and picked it up. He slowly unfolded it, his eyes scanning the contents. His face went completely white. Without a word, he handed the paper to Mia. Her hands trembled as she took it. There, scrawled in the center of the page, was a single word. Her name, Mia. It was written in a messy, desperate hand, using a pigment that was a dark, rusty red. The same exact color as the fingernail scratches she saw that morning. She never stayed late at school again. Thanks for watching. If you have a scary story of your own, share it in the comments. If someone knocks on your study room door after midnight, whatever you do, don't answer, because what's out there, it won't be a person. This happened to my friend Sam during finals week. He was always a last-minute crammer, so pulling all-nighters at the campus library was his ritual. That night, he managed to book the last available space, study room 6, tucked away at the end of a long, quiet hallway on the 3rd floor. He settled in around 10 p.m., surrounded by textbooks and energy drinks, ready to conquer his history final. The first few hours were a blur of highlighting notes and typing furiously. The library grew quieter and quieter until the only sounds were the hum of the ventilation and the click of his keyboard. Around 12:30 a.m., just as he was starting to feel the exhaustion set in, he heard it. A soft, hesitant knock on the study room door. Tap, tap. Sam was a bit surprised. Who would be looking for him at this hour? He got up, stretched, and pulled the door open. He peered left, then right. The long hallway was completely empty, lit only by the dim, flickering overhead lights. Strange. He figured it was just his tired mind playing tricks on him. He shut the door, sat back down, and tried to refocus on his notes. About 5 minutes passed. Then came another knock. This time, it was louder, more insistent. Knock, knock. K-N-O-C-K. It sounded urgent. This time, Sam didn't hesitate. He practically jumped out of his chair and threw the door open, expecting to find one of his friends playing a prank. But again, nothing. The hallway was deserted. Not a soul in sight. The silence was almost deafening. Now he was starting to feel a little creeped out. It was one thing to hear a faint noise, but this was deliberate. He locked the study room door and decided to take a walk to clear his head. He went down to the main circulation desk, where the night librarian, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable, was reading a book. Sam explained what had happened. "I'm in study room 6, he said, "and someone keeps knocking on my door, but there's never anyone there." As he spoke, he saw the color drain from Mrs. Gable's face. She put her book down slowly and looked at him with wide, serious eyes. "Son," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're in room 6?" Sam nodded. She leaned forward and lowered her voice even more. "That room is supposed to stay empty after midnight. We have a standing rule?" "A rule? Why?" Sam asked, his heart starting to pound. "For years," she explained, "students have reported the same thing, knocking on the door after midnight. Some have even said they heard scratching. But whenever they check, the hall is empty. It became such a recurring complaint that the university just decided to block off the room as reservation system. After 11:59 p.m., you must have slipped through a glitch in the system." A cold dread washed over Sam. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. He thanked the librarian, his mind racing. He needed to get out of there. He hurried back up to the third floor, the empty hallway suddenly feeling much more menacing. He unlocked the door to room 6, his only thought to grab his backpack and leave. He quickly stuffed his laptop and textbooks into his bag. His pen rolled off the desk and fell to the floor. As he bent down to pick it up, his eyes were drawn to the small rectangular window on the study room door. And that's when he saw it. A tapping, but it wasn't coming from a normal height. It was coming from the very bottom of the window, near the floor. Tap, 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 right on the glass. It was as if someone was lying flat on the ground outside, tapping on the window to get his attention. But through the glass, all he could see was the dark, empty hallway. No one was there. That was it. He didn't even stand up straight. He just grabbed his bag from the floor and bolted. He didn't look back. He sprinted down the hall, flew down the stairs, and didn't stop running until he was outside in the cool night air, his heart hammering against his ribs. The next morning, still shaken, Sam couldn't let it go. He had to know what was out there. He went to campus security and, after some convincing, persuaded them to check the security camera footage from the third-floor hallway. The security officer fast-forwarded the footage to around 12:30 a.m. They watched the empty corridor. They saw Sam open the door, look around, and go back inside. 5 minutes later, they saw him open it again, more quickly this time. And then, they saw what Sam didn't. Just a few moments after Sam closed the door the second time, something emerged from the shadows at the far end of the hall. It wasn't a person. It was a shape. A dark, vaguely human-like form, crawling low to the ground. It moved unnaturally, its limbs bending at impossible angles as it dragged itself across the floor. It made no sound. The thing crawled the entire length of the hallway, stopping directly in front of the door to study room 6. It paused there for a moment. Then, in a move that made the security officer physically recoil, the shape contorted and began to flatten itself. It slid under the door, compressing its form as if it had no bones, no solid structure at all, and disappeared into the room with Sam. The footage they showed Sam still haunts him to this day. He knows what was tapping on that window. It wasn't in the hall. It was already in the room with him, lying on the floor, right behind him. He never stayed late at the library again. And he always remembers the librarian's warning. If you hear a knock after midnight, don't answer. You'll just be letting it know you're there. Thanks for watching. If you have a scary story of your own, share it in the comments. Every school has that one classroom nobody likes staying in alone, but this one had a student who never left. Meet Jake, a diligent student, maybe a little too diligent. He had this habit of staying late to study, always in the same room. Room 204. It was quiet, isolated, perfect for cramming before a big test. At least, that's what he thought. Night after night, as the sun went down and the school corridors grew eerily silent, Jake would be hunched over his books. And every night, around 7 p.m., he'd notice her. In the very back row, a girl in an old-style blue uniform, sitting perfectly still. Her long, dark hair always covered her face, so he could never get a good look at her. He just assumed she was shy, another student who preferred the quiet solitude of the empty classroom. For weeks, this was their silent routine. Jake at the front, her at the back. He never spoke to her, and she never moved. One evening, feeling a bit bold, Jake decided to break the silence. He gave a small, friendly wave in her direction. "Hey," he called out softly, his voice echoing in the large room. The girl didn't respond. She didn't move a muscle. It was like she hadn't even heard him. Jake shrugged, feeling a little awkward, and turned back to his textbook. He figured she probably had headphones on. He focused on a particularly tricky math problem, his eyes glued to the page for maybe, 10 seconds? When he glanced up again, his heart stopped. She wasn't in the back row anymore. She was 3 rows closer, still in the same posture, head down, hair hiding her face, but undeniably closer. A cold shiver crawled up Jake's spine. How did she move so fast? And so silently? He hadn't heard a thing. No chair scraping, no footsteps, nothing. His mind started racing. Maybe he was just tired. Seeing things. He tried to rationalize it, telling himself to calm down. He took a deep breath and blinked, a long, slow blink, hoping to clear his vision. But when his eyes opened, the rationalizations evaporated into pure terror. She was no longer several rows away. She was right beside him, sitting in the desk next to his. He could almost feel the chill coming off her. Her head was still down, that curtain of black hair completely obscuring her features. He didn't see her face, but he knew. He just knew she was looking at him. Jake didn't scream. He couldn't. The sound was trapped in his throat. He shot out of his chair so fast it clattered to the floor, grabbed his backpack, and bolted. He didn't look back. He just ran, his footsteps pounding through the empty halls, the sound of his own panicked breathing filling his ears. He found a teacher who was locking up for the night, gasping for air, words tumbling out of his mouth about the girl in room 204. The teacher listened patiently, her expression calm, almost sympathetic. When Jake finished his frantic story, she simply nodded. "Ah, you must have met her," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Don't you worry about it, Jake. She's harmless. She's been gone a very long time." The teacher then led him to her office and pulled out a dusty, old yearbook from a shelf. She flipped through the brittle pages until she found what she was looking for. She pointed to a black and white photo. It was a class picture from decades ago. In the back row sat a girl with long, dark hair. Jake's blood ran cold. It was her. The same girl, wearing the same old-fashioned blue uniform. The teacher explained that the girl had passed away in that very classroom, room 204, during a sudden, severe asthma attack. She had been sitting in that exact seat, waiting for her parents to pick her up after school. Jake never stayed late to study again. Not at school, anyway. And as for room 204, it's always locked up tight as soon as the last bell rings. Some say it's just a school policy, but others know it's to make sure that the girl who stayed after class can finally have the room all to herself. Thanks for watching. If you have a spooky story from your own school, share it in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tailies. Stay safe out there.